This is Infants on Thrones.
Minisode.
This is Infants on Thrones.
Baby steps.
You want someone to preach to?
The philosophies of men.
I like magical toys.
You want religion, do you?
Mingled with humor.
I don't believe in them.
There will be many willing to preach to you the philosophies of men mingled with humor.
We are evolving.
Baby steps.
You can buy anything in this world of money.
Look for the good in everything. Look for the people who will set your soul free. It always seems impossible until it's done. Look for the good in everyone.
All right, welcome back to Infants on Thrones. This is episode 750. Infants on COVID, an introduction. I think that's what I'm going to call it. Who knows? I'm going to be recording tonight with Mike and Doug and Shalise from the Mormons on Mushrooms podcast. We got some things we're going to be talking about. And, the very first time I recorded with them was back in January, the day that I found out that I'd lost a job. And now this time, 9 months later, the day I find out that I've tested positive for COVID. So there's this weird, odd poetry to it. So I'm looking forward to recording tonight with Mike and Doug and Shalise. But over the weekend, I was putting together the interview that I did with a listener named Ty. That'll go out next week. And it was when I was feeling ill. And I don't know if any of you have had COVID, but if you had, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like you to reach out. I'd like to talk with you, find out what your experience has been like, and compare notes a little bit. For me so far, it just feels like a very severe head cold, chest cold. The strangest thing is just not being able to concentrate as well. Focusing has been more of a challenge, and I've heard people talk about that. But this is the first time I've really experienced it, so that's interesting. But what I want to do today, since I didn't finish editing and preparing the episode with Ty, is his name, I got another one today from a listener named Richard. And so I want to read what Richard wrote and give a quick response for you, Richard, here, and also invite you, Richard. I'll send you an email. If you're interested in coming on and having a conversation, we can do that. And for any of you listeners who want to do something like that, just shoot me an email, especially if you have COVID or have had COVID. I'd be interested in talking with you. But so here's what Richard said. He titled the email, "Fantastic Deconstruction Episodes Lately." Well, thank you very much, Richard. I'm really interested to know what what I've been deconstructing for you that you find so fantastic. I'd love to have that conversation with you. But so Richard says, "I've really enjoyed your episodes lately. I would love to give you the long diatribe of my story and how I found the rabbit hole and came close to veering into traffic when my TBM dear wife found a Grant Palmer book. My Grant Palmer book, yeah. The struggle of not knowing how to navigate the phases while attending Elders Quorum and getting blackballed. I'm 4 years into that rabbit hole, and a PMO, physically in, mentally out, with light participation in church things, mainly attending church and class with the dear wife. Anyway, as my wife is getting better at lightly listening to me and having what she calls post-church debriefs, I'm wanting to learn more about steelman arguments." That's really cool, Richard. I mean, thank you for bringing this to me, by the way. Anyway, so Richard continues and says, "I hate when she sets up, unknowingly, straw mans." Is it straw mans or is it straw men? Straw man arguments. Like, I'm not perfect, so I can't expect the prophet to be perfect. I've never made that argument. No, you haven't, Richard, and I'll address this in a minute. So Richard continues and says, is steel manning basically a means of expressing to the other in their words and yours that you understand their perspective? Yes, that's exactly what it is. Some elements are covered in Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. I'm not familiar with that book, Richard. Like mirroring and labeling. I don't totally know what you mean by these terms, but I think so. And then you ask me, Richard, can you take that a bit further? I can try, but like I said, I'm not familiar with those things to really know what to build on them, but I can respond to what you've asked me. So Richard says, I don't need my wife to venture into the rabbit hole with me, but I would like it if she could somehow see and acknowledge some people draw different conclusions from the same facts. Example, the rock in the hat works for you, not for me. Thank you so much, Richard. All right, so Richard, the thing that first jumped out to me when I read this, I mean, again, first of all, I appreciate that you've been enjoying the episodes lately with the deconstruction and that you want to know more about steel manning. And I first came across the term steel manning in the Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris debates from about 2 or 3 years ago. They kind of took it on the road. I think they did 2 in Canada and then 2 over in Europe. And they started each one of those sessions by steel manning what the other's position had been in the previous session. And I thought that was from a listening perspective, it really helped me to understand each other's position even better, because they were processing, they were filtering, like what they were hearing the other person saying, and that really helped me as a listener. So I really like the steel man as opposed to a straw man where you're creating this argument that you can easily knock down that really isn't the other person's argument. Like you gave the example of you're not perfect, so why should you expect the prophets to be perfect? When I hear something like that, what do you think it is? What do you think that your wife is saying? I see it as a defensive tactic, which means there's something that she feels like is being threatened. And the nice thing about doing a steel man argument is that you're presenting an idea to somebody that is their idea. So there isn't anything threatening about it. There shouldn't be anything threatening about it. Because the way that I understand it, when somebody is threatened, the amygdala in the brain is going crazy and saying fight or flight. And that's where this defensiveness comes from. So it's an indication to me that your wife feels like there's something that's threatening to her, which would make a lot of sense because she's been raised her entire life to be told that if you're not married in the temple, you're not going to be sealed for time and all eternity, and everything is going to fall apart. And if you leave the church and, her husband leaves the church, then her whole celestial marriage could be a threat, so you start pulling on these threads and the whole thing could unravel. And what belief system do you have to fall into? Like what kind of a net, if you're walking a tightrope and you fall, is there a net beneath to catch you? In, being raised in the Mormon church, that's your entire world. That is your net. There isn't anything else. And so when that falls apart, it can be quite threatening. So you're wanting to know, steel manning is great as a way just to show her that you hear her and you care about her and you're going to reduce the threat level. Now, the second part of what I heard you say is that you want to change her. You want to change the way that she thinks about things. And that goes into the external control psychology that maybe you've heard me talk about on a few of the recent episodes. And there's actually, I've done a few Patreon episodes. I think there were 4 of these where I had this really nice conversation with a listener in Liverpool, and he's a therapist of 30 years. I've toyed with the idea of publishing these to the regular feed, not just to Patreon, because they're really good conversations, and he's such a cool guy. I really like him. Stewie is his name. Stewie for short. And it's just so fun to listen to somebody with that Liverpool accent. He hates hearing himself, but I've really enjoyed it. So that's not necessarily a plug to join Patreon to come and listen to those episodes with Stewie, but you could if you wanted to. But maybe I'll publish them out. But we did spend some time talking about external control psychology and how when you identify that there's a problem that you think is somebody else response, somebody else perspective, somebody else reaction, and that if you could just get them to change their perspective, just get them to change their view, then everything will be okay. You basically are going to be beating your head against a wall, because no matter what you do, you cannot change another person's perspective. You can't. And you can try to manipulate and threaten and bribe them and, like all kinds of things to try to make them change. But you're not going to find any peace until you really find how to change yourself and accept them, which is why I think it's so cool that you're coming to me saying, I want to learn more about steel manning, because in restating back to her positions, not only will you be... See, here's where I'm in that COVID mind fog thing, and I'm starting to lose my train of thought. Not only will you be helping calm her down so she doesn't feel a threat, but maybe you'll feel like there's not a threat either, because maybe the reason that you want her to change is because you feel like there's some kind of a threat, that her not accepting you completely is a threat somehow. But is it really? It might be a threat to certain things, but those are the areas where, like if I was going to be working with you, Richard, as a life coach, those are the things that we would focus on, is your own relationship with yourself, how comfortable you are accepting yourself. Because I would ask you this question, and I, depending on the relationship that we develop together, I would either take it easy on you or, like ram it down your throat and say, why do you need her to change? What is it about her accepting you that is going to be different than if you could just accept yourself and accept who she's at and let it be what it is, and let go of any need of her having to change, and really support her where she's at and accept her ability to accept you where you're at, recognizing that there's this whole Mormon church story that is really super important to her and is scary when it starts to fall apart. So anyway, I like I said, Richard, I'm going to send you a link, and I hope you'll respond and we can have this conversation in real time. I hope that this little blurb was helpful and valuable to you. I know it's kind of weird right now, just where I'm at with this whole COVID thing. But I wanted to get something out, and now I'm just rambling. Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones, Richard. Thank you for sending in this message. I hope to hear from other listeners. I always enjoy it when I do. And hope that I'm able to be a little bit more on point and articulate tonight when I talk with Mike and Doug and Shalise. And thank you all again for listening to Infants on Thrones. Talk with you later.
Put down the weapons that you use against yourself. You don't need them anymore.
Hey there, thanks for listening all the way to the end. Now, I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I have more to say about this topic, and I'm going to do that with a follow-up behind-the-scenes sharing time episode on Patreon. So, if you're in a position where you can throw me a few dollars each month to support the work that I put into creating this podcast, please come and support me on Patreon where you'll also get access to additional content. Did you know that I also create sharing time episodes that are available only to Patreon subscribers? I've been doing that for a few years, so there's a lot of content there that you can have access to. So please come and support this podcast if you can. I greatly appreciate it.
Hi, this is Hillary.
Matthew, Ryan,
Carol,
Keith,
Ashley, and I like to play bingo online while listening to Infants on Thrones.
You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com.
And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes.
I did.
Anyone for the closing prayer?
My worst crime is an inside job. Dark thoughts taking over like an inside mob. I tune into the scene between the eyes and take a breath.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.
I sit still and watch the thoughts float past me. Never mind the future, never mind what the past be. I like to jump and let the universe catch me. Free fall, watch the beauty blow past me. I keep my pockets light, destination in sight. Keep my actions elevated to compassionate heights. I'm walking past the fight, laying down on Sunday night.